This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hsien and I have tried to change the healthcare system from inside for years, decades, and the dial is not moving fast enough. So we leapfrog over them right now and went right to the citizens with this book and said, you know what? You guys can be the change agents. We need enough people with this information so that our revolution can be successful. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to ruffle the feathers or create a tidal wave of new, empowered, respectfully assertive citizens.
This is the Heart of Hospice podcast with Helen Bauer. Today's guest is the co-host of the Waiting Room Revolution podcast. I'm talking with Dr. Sammy Winemaker. Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, the Heart of Hospice is here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
Today's episode is sponsored by Odonata Care. Odonata's motto is, "Care is treatment." They have a mission to transform the end-of-life experience for the patient and caregivers through education and support. Odonata Care is revolutionizing the hospice experience with their booklet, The Care Plan, A Path to Comfort for the Hospice Patient, along with 50 free YouTube videos that teach the basics of bedside care. Visit thecareplan.net for more information. The sponsor for this episode of The Heart of Hospice is National HME. National HME is a direct service hospice durable medical equipment company. Using their proprietary software, Hospice Cloud Pro, providers can enter new patient information, order equipment, arrange pickups, and obtain real-time reporting, including order status and much more. National HME excels at providing service with care and empathy. To learn more, visit nationalhme.com. Now, here's today's episode.
My guest today, Dr. Sammy Winemaker, I think she and I may have separated at hospice birth because we think on the same wavelength. We want the same things. We're having the same conversations. It was very much some mutual admiration and mutual thinking. So my guest today, Dr. Sammy Winemaker, is an associate clinical professor in the Department of Medicine in the Division of Palliative Care at McMaster University. She teaches palliative care to health professionals. She, along with Dr. Hsien Seow, is the co-host of the Waiting Room Revolution podcast. She's down to earth. She's with you. She's with her patients. She's empowering people who are receiving health care. And you're going to hear her why and the work that she's doing and her book that she's got coming out in September, Hope for the Best, Plan for the Rest, 7 Keys for Navigating a Life-Changing Diagnosis. You're really going to love this conversation. I know I did. So here's my discussion with Dr. Sammy Winemaker. Sammy, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast. It's great to talk to you.
Ellen, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Nice, nice. Okay, so I like to start off with an icebreaker. This is not a question that I sent you, so I'm going to catch you off guard a little bit.
Okay.
Sammy, if you could only have one color of clothing in your closet, what color would it be?
Camel.
Really? Nobody's ever said that. So explain, please.
I just think the color camel, which is sort of a wheat kind of color, I would say, I don't know. I feel like it's so soft. And I'm not a bright color kind of person. So I don't know. I just love the color camel. It's just so earthy.
I like that. It's neutral, and it's kind of like a blank slate for other things. I kind of like it.
Are you going to try to analyze me based on my color? As I'm interested.
No. I can barely figure out my own, much less analyze anybody else. So here's what I would tell you. I'm super practical when it comes to stuff like that. So if somebody asked me that question, I would say black.
Oh.
Because most of my workout stuff is black, and that way I wouldn't have to worry about sorting through the laundry and figuring out different loads. I could just throw it all in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Helen, the same question, what your color is. So black.
Yeah, no creativity there, just practical, not as much laundry work. That's pretty bad, isn't it? Especially for a hospice person.
I know. I was just going to say, I avoid black because even my car, while I do home visits, I would never buy a black car because I don't want people to feel like the hearse has, driven up to the house. So I have a white car.
That's true. When I was in the field, I never wore black scrubs.
Oh, yeah. See?
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah, I think people do associate it with the Undertaker, right?
The Grim Reaper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a podcaster.
Yes.
You and your co-host, also a physician, have a podcast called The Waiting Room Revolution, right? That's
right. Dr. Hsien Seow, he is a researcher. So he's a PhD researcher. And we started a podcast against all odds. We did it, just like you.
Oh, exactly. How did healthcare people get into podcasting? But so what was the momentum behind starting your show?
Well, Hsien and I always wanted to write a book, to start a social movement, let's just say, a public-facing social movement. And writing seemed to take a long time. And Hsien used to tell me, Sammy, you can talk about this all day long. You talk about it till you're blue in the face. Maybe if we record what you're saying, I'll be able to, write it. But we just realized that talking about it was so much easier. And so we decided to record it. Someone suggested doing a podcast, and it was as simple as that. And we just, we used the recording of the podcast to almost mature our thoughts and to talk it out and talk to so many people that it actually became amazing intel for the book that we eventually wrote. But yeah, we started with a podcast.
So did you have a background in public speaking, or did Hsien have that so that you guys knew what you were doing when you got started?
Neither of us had ever listened to a podcast. Okay. So
you had never even listened to a podcast before you had your own. Wow.
Yeah. So we never had listened to one. Both of us, as working in healthcare, do a lot of teaching. So whether that's teaching to other healthcare providers or students, we have been in front of audiences before, but neither of us have had communication training at all. So it was intimidating.
Yeah, I had the same feeling when I got started. And what I realized was, if you view it as education, as nurses, we do that all the time. Physicians do that all the time. We're always teaching patients and other providers and new people that are coming along. So that part of it, I think, is very natural for someone in healthcare when it comes to podcasting. So what are you talking about? The Waiting Room Revolution. What does that name mean? And what are you guys talking about on your show?
Yeah. So the essence of it, the core of it is season 1. And in season 1, we basically share with the public that, if there isn't a certain mindset that you have or certain skills that you know about when you become a patient or a caregiver of a patient with a life-limiting illness or a serious illness, you start your journey behind the 8 ball. And what do I mean by that? It's almost like you have blinders on. You don't know what you don't know. We don't train to be a patient, and we don't train to be a caregiver. And you just end up in those positions. And the healthcare system will just blow you around, and almost like a boat without an anchor. And over an illness journey, people will end up at the end meeting someone like me, a palliative care physician, and feel like they've lost hope, that they're terrified, that they're anxious, they're worried, they're fearful, they're shocked, they don't recognize themselves, they don't know what to expect, and many of them don't even know they're dying. And so we wanted to collect all the information from the thousands and thousands of stories that we had heard over and over again from patients and from research, and deconstruct it and then reassemble it and offer some kind of product that could be introduced at the beginning of an illness that would fundamentally change the illness journey. That this would not be about end of life. It would not be about hospice. It would not be about palliative care. It wouldn't be about death and dying. It would be about helping people to have the best illness experience possible, given the fact that we cannot change the disease. But we can change the experience by helping people have an eyes wide open journey, so that wink, wink, nudge, nudge. By the way, it is going to improve the final chapter. It is going to improve dying. It is going to get you palliative care and hospice care, but that's not the reason why we wrote the book. We wrote the book because we saw too many very broken, problematic journeys.
So I think what you guys experience in Canada very much mirrors the experience for patients and caregivers here in the United States. For us, the sections of healthcare are so siloed. Yeah. Palliative care is its own thing. Aggressive care is its own thing. Home health, which is the next step in most people's minds. And then hospice, it's all made to be these abrupt steps, stops and starts, where a patient has to have the energy and the bandwidth emotionally and mentally to process. There was something you said about a patient doesn't even recognize themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's totally true. As they move through things, if we haven't helped them transition and have these really open conversations early on, they get to a point where they don't even know who they're supposed to be and how to handle it. It takes a great amount of energy for a patient to process everything that's happening. And that's on top of experiencing a disease at the same time.
Helen, when I meet people in their home, because I do palliative care, I'm a home visiting palliative care doctor. It shocks me when, I ask people, is it okay I speak openly with you? And they look at each other and they say, yes, of course. And I say, well, is it okay if I speak frankly without any sugar? And they say, of course, if you know something, we want to know also. And so I then, share with them my understanding of what's happened in their healthcare journey, where things are at now, and what the future is going to look like, making sure the whole time I'm checking in and asking them if it's too much information for them. But right. People gobble it up, and they often say to me afterwards, Dr. Winemaker, you're the first person who has ever been straight with us. And I'm not telling you this, Helen, to pat myself on the back. I'm telling you because this was also the impetus behind our discomfort with what's happening in the healthcare system that made us do what we're doing now, which is this social movement, the waiting room revolution, because it became very uncomfortable for us. I guess that would be the polite way of saying it, that we were catching people at the end of a long journey. They had already had touch points with many other care teams, they had been transferred along like a baton in a relay race, and the whole time getting, standard kind of healthcare conveyor belt type care. And people feel that they're deconstructed into an illness or an organ or, a number, and they no longer recognize themselves. So again, I felt like as a palliative care doctor, I was catching people at the end of a stream, but I was in like the cesspool at the end, plucking people out of, a murky water. And yeah, so the waiting room revolution, just to go back to your last question about why we even named it that way, is because we just felt patients and families were perpetually waiting literally in waiting rooms where the power differential between sitting in those chairs and waiting for the test results, waiting for the doctor in the white coat with the stethoscope to, bring them into some cold room to give them information, feeling suspended in the mystery of what's about to happen in a waiting room. It's just so uncomfortable. And then, metaphorically, just waiting and not understanding what's happening, like being in a maze with very high hedges and not really being able to see over the bushes. Like, just so it became like literal and metaphorical, this social movement that we wanted to give the power back to the citizens, to patients and families.
So there's a lot to unpack there. What strikes me about what you just said is that you're a home visiting palliative care physician, and you have patients and families that say, nobody's ever said that to us before.
Yeah.
How does how do people, not just patients, right? We have to remember their humanity. How do they get through all of this life and disease treatment, and nobody's ever said directly to them, this is what is happening? I have had hospice patients that the family sat down with me and the patient, and we were talking about signing papers, and they say, we don't really know why you're here.
Right.
Our doctor just said he was going to refer us, but he didn't say why. And so as a hospice nurse, just meeting these folks, it's up to me to say, you have a terminal disease with a limited life expectancy. What I leave unsaid is your physician, your nurse practitioner, your healthcare providers should have had this conversation with you long ago.
Exactly. I feel the exact same way as you, Helen. And the worst part about it is that once you explain to people, they don't just say, oh, you're the first person, but they then sometimes say, had I known, I would have made different decisions.
Right.
I would have spent my time differently. Are you kidding me that other teams knew that this was going to happen? And so you feel like you're part of a cleanup job. In comes the hospice nurse or palliative care team to, clean up the mess in aisle 4. And like a customer service department, make the customer feel like they got what they needed before, off they go. And so I felt like I was like almost contributing to a broken system by just cleaning up one patient and family at a time, stitching them back together, making them feel human and whole again at the 11th hour. And it just was not enough. It was not enough.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've had some of the same emotions and feelings too. So we're talking basically about advanced care plan conversations is what it comes down to. Not just full disclosure of what their medical and health status is, but how to have those advanced care plan conversations, which it's the elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about because it's so difficult. So let's look at it from both I don't want to say consumer, but the patient, the client side of things, and the professional provider side of things. What do you think individuals who are seriously ill struggle with most when it comes to having those advanced care plan conversations? What do you think is the big thing that they really wrestle with?
Well, I think as a society, if we don't start acknowledging that advanced care planning conversations should happen when we're well, then they become much scarier when we actually have an illness. So in Canada, where I practice, we have many campaigns, some more successful than others, about having these normal discussions as you go through your life, sharing with the important people around you who may end up having to make decisions for you about the things that are most important to you, what you value, and what you are willing to trade off. And so it should all begin to happen very naturally over a lifetime, so that at some point when you do get an illness, it becomes a revisiting of those conversations instead of the first time you're having the conversation. When someone's already ill, the things that are on their mind are, am I going to die? Am I going to be cured? Am I going to kick this or not? And they're scared. And so operating from, that point is a whole lot more fearful than before you have an illness. So I think that that's one reason, is because we just don't do a good enough job before a person gets an illness, normalizing advanced care planning discussions. And the other thing is we are a death denying, illness denying society, and we, push off those kinds of discussions because they're uncomfortable, and people are hesitant to get into what they think are going to be uncomfortable discussions. So I think we just avoid the whole topic altogether. I think patients, by the time they have an illness, have other priorities, and they're making big decisions about treatments. And I think they don't have the calm time to really think about what's important to them. Just that they're more focused on getting through the illness and getting through the treatment and the next test. I think they live in a day-to-day world. Once they have an illness, they're living in the weeds or the rabbit holes of the illness experience. And to have an advanced care planning discussion requires you to pull yourself out of those holes and to have like a big picture discussion from 10,000 feet up about broad things, long-lasting values. And when you're sick, I think somehow you end up just seeing the trees instead of the forest of what's going on. So I think those are some of the reasons.
I think it takes so much emotional and mental energy.
Yeah, that too.
We ask a lot of our patients and our families, okay, so you've been told now that your cancer's advanced to a stage 4. So now we want to talk about advanced care planning, but you're already sick. Your finances are stressed. Your relationship with your primary caregiver, your partner or spouse, is strained because of what's happening. You're physically, emotionally exhausted. And the anticipatory grief, loss of identity, I think there's just so much. And then to say, okay, now we want to talk about what you want when you die and what your lifelong values are. That view from 10,000 feet, when they're embedded in just that day-to-day, like you're talking about, that's exhausting and near impossible, I would think, for a lot of people to do.
And gets blurred.
Yeah.
There's too much noise with all the things you mentioned that it's hard to clear the fog and really think about what you value.
Absolutely.
I think also people reduce advanced care planning to interventions. Like, do I want this intervention or that intervention or not? Instead of thinking of advanced care planning as what are the important values that I hold true to myself, that in the event that a decision needs to be made, I need to remind myself of those values so that they can influence what I want to do in that particular decision point.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think healthcare professionals sort of aid and abet that.
Yeah.
Because what, in my experience, I have found is that we get the advanced care planning documentation done that serves us best.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a DNR, then we don't have to figure out whether to tell you to call 911, or if we have one of our staff members, team members in the house, when a patient stops breathing, are we CPR certified? We don't have to figure all that out. All we have to do is let that patient just go. They're dying on their own, and there's a DNR. Sometimes I think we push that because it's for our convenience and our clarity,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it's the most appropriate thing for the patient. Physically and medically, it might be the best thing for the patient, but for them emotionally and as far as their right to choose the path, is it the right thing? But I think we do get caught up. I call them the big basics, where
Mm-hmm.
a patient has a DNR and they have a medical power of attorney that clarifies things for the healthcare staff. Again, that's not patient-centered. That's all about us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that trips us up sometimes. So that segues really well into what I want to talk about next. Why do you think, and what do you think we struggle with the most when we're counseling people who are seriously ill? And not just because of time constraints, but what do you think emotionally and personally for each healthcare individual? For us individually, what do you think we struggle with? What holds us back from really having open conversations?
Well, there's probably a lot of practical reasons, like you mentioned, some of them being time, et cetera, environment, privacy, those kinds of things. But I think when you unpack all of it, research definitely suggests that healthcare providers worry that if they infuse the truth into the conversation, the reality of the illness into the conversation, that they worry about making people hopeless, depressed, sad. And so it's easy to avoid. Plus, we are trained to fix things. We are trained to intervene and do things. So these conversations often require a healthcare provider to sit in the gray zone and to sit with discomfort with someone and just be present and use themselves as a therapeutic intervention in one of those conversations. And I don't think we're trained properly that way. I know we aren't trained properly that way. So we find it much easier to talk about the things we can do, and we find it easier to try to fix things. And so we offer more tests and we offer more treatments. And instead of sitting someone down and offering to tell them or to invite them into a conversation about what's exactly going on and truly helping them make a decision that's best for them. So I think we're just really uncomfortable. Plus the fact that I don't know about in the US, but in Canada, the curriculum for healthcare providers regarding palliative care and hospice care is not mandatory across the board. So people tend to just come across it if they've chosen to do an elective or to have an experience in that area. So we graduate tons of healthcare providers every year who haven't had the training. And so they feel uncomfortable that they don't do it. It's only a hospice nurse that has those conversations, or a palliative care nurse or doctor, that they don't have to do it because they didn't train to be in that specialty. But of course, here we say it's everyone's business. Every healthcare provider is in the business of truth telling. And so we need to help people understand you can have open, honest discussions with patients and families. And you can both instill hope and reality at the same time. That if we take on a cheerleading role and just, hide behind toxic positivity all the time. Oh, you look good today, Harvey. Oh, don't you look great? You're out of the ICU. Oh my goodness, that must have been horrible. You're looking so much better today. But Harvey and his wife know that he is not the same as when he went into the ICU. He's much more tired. He's needing help with bathing. He's not getting more energy. His appetite is waning. It's not helpful for the healthcare provider to say, oh, you're looking great today. You keep it up. You got to keep up this fight. And if a patient and family dare ask for the truth, like, can you help me understand what the future is going to hold? It's not helpful for healthcare providers to say things like, well, we don't have a crystal ball, or, oh, come on, now, let's think positively. Let's, don't think like that. There'll always be something we can do. So I agree with you, Helen, we're in cahoots with this whole thing. As healthcare providers, we're missing the mark. We're backing off when we should be leaning in to these difficult discussions.
In my experience, I think what patients and families can imagine is way worse than the reality that we could give them. An informed reality is way better than an out-of-control imagination.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that. I think people actually have more comfort with the truth-telling. I think they have a better quality of life if they can sit with the truth-telling. I think healthcare professionals struggle with those conversations because for a lot of families, it opens up a whole can of worms. Mm-hmm. You have to look at their culture. You have to look at their faith. You have to look at their communication dynamic, their relationship dynamic. And when you start stirring the water, the mud and the muck, whatever is going to rise, and then we have to deal with it. And it's the same in the U.S. We are not trained for these things. I had no end-of-life training. I never saw a patient die until I'd been a nurse for about 1.5 years or 2.
Yeah.
And that was in a controlled setting in the hospital.
Yes. So we do people a disservice. These things take a lot of time when the baton has been passed over and over and over again. And then someone needs 60 to 90 minutes to go over all this stuff. Again, almost too late. So we're filling in the gaps at the end of life that should have started much earlier on in the illness journey when things were less scary, that every single healthcare provider had a small responsibility to do part of this work. And so we're really trying hard here in Canada to talk about a palliative approach is a philosophy of care. It's not a diagnosis, labeling someone palliative. It's not a point in time in the illness. It's not a setting. It is a philosophy, and we need to teach it to all healthcare providers so that they can naturally integrate it into their natural skill set without ever having to label it, and that they know how to dance across these different approaches at different times through the illness, where there's, disease management and disease stabilization, but you can also infuse a palliative approach in a seamless way so that a person never feels like there's this weird point in time where they're slapped with the label palliative, the rug is pulled from beneath them, and they are transferred to some Grim Reaper program. That contributes to the suffering our patients and families feel. It amplifies their symptoms. And now with medical assistance in dying legalized in Canada, there are a lot of people who are requesting medical assistance in dying simply because they're catastrophizing what the future is going to look like because no one has offered them the truth about what normal dying looks like. And so it's very scary here. Not that I am giving any opinion about medical assistance in dying, but what I am saying is that if someone's going to make a decision about that, it is life and death, and the person deserves the right to have informed consent, which means that the alternative to assisted dying has been described, which is normal dying. And so if we as healthcare providers are uncomfortable talking about normal progression of illness, normal dying, normal everything, then how do we think we're in a position to talk about medical assistance in dying? And so people have chosen medical assistance in dying without really knowing what was the alternative.
Right.
What was my natural death going to look like?
The sponsor for this episode of The Heart of Hospice is Odonata Care. Odonata Care founders Nancy Hireman and Brenda Kazire are certified hospice and palliative nurses with over 40 years combined experience. They are experts in end-of-life care. Nancy and Brenda have created a 32-page booklet called The Care Plan, A Path to Comfort for the Hospice Patient. Their goal is to empower patients and their caregivers with valuable information right at their fingertips, wherever and whenever they need it. Odonata Care also offers a suite of 50 free training videos on YouTube that teaches the basics of bedside care for personal and professional caregivers. Odonata Care's motto is "Care is treatment," which is why their bottom line is caring for the patient. Nancy and Brenda have a mission to transform the end-of-life experience through education and support. You can purchase copies of the Care Plan for yourself or your hospice agency at thecareplan.net. And look for their new Spanish version coming to their online store very soon. The sponsor for this episode of The Heart of Hospice is National HME. National HME is a direct service hospice durable medical equipment company that's serious about providing excellent service through communication and coordination for providers and families. They aim to be an extension of the hospice care team and to make DME the easiest part of the hospice provider's day. Using their proprietary software, Hospice Cloud Pro, providers can enter new patient information, order equipment, arrange pickups, and obtain real-time reporting on their order status, plus much more. National HME also provides text message notifications which keep everyone up to date on when the equipment will be delivered. National understands how important communication is when it comes to every aspect of a hospice patient's care. Here's Chris Maglioka, Senior Vice President of Business Development, describing how National HME technicians stay connected with patients and families.
The family will know through text messaging when the technician's on their way. They'll actually know the technician's name. So, we get the order, our call center calls that patient's family and lets them know, we received the order from the hospice, we'll be out there this afternoon. The technician will contact you with an ETA, and then again, they're going to get that next phone call plus a text message from the technician introducing themselves, letting them know who they are, and then with their ETA. It all starts and ends with the communication part.
National HME does more than just provide equipment. They provide service with care and empathy. To learn more about the services provided by National HME, you can visit their website at nationalhme.com. Now, back to today's episode.
So you have a book coming out. Hope for the best, plan for the rest, 7 keys for navigating a life-changing diagnosis. Tell me about the book.
Yeah, so the book is, let's just say at first we were going to do what to expect when you're dying, what to expect when exiting, the what to expect when you're expecting book
right.
That many pregnant women got. But of course, my sister said, who would ever pick up a book like that? But anyway, and so this book is, it's a hopeful book. It's a positive book. Even the cover has a flock of beautiful colored birds on it. We're hoping going to be the guidebook that people feel they must have or must give to someone who have had a serious diagnosis or caregiving for someone. It is the roadmap to being a patient or a care provider that's going to give you all the information that's behind the scenes that you don't even know to ask for, so that you can navigate an illness experience and come out the other side, whatever that is, feeling like you still recognize yourself, that you've made the decisions that represent and reflect who you are, that you hopefully have no regrets, that you've used your time wisely, and we're giving people the power back in the healthcare equation. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is that we're encouraging a new type of patient, a new type of caregiver, so that they come to the healthcare system in billions, and they force the healthcare system to have to change. That they should never, ever come across, I'm sorry, we don't have a crystal ball again. So Hsien and I have tried to change the healthcare system from inside for years, decades, and the dial is not moving fast enough. So we leapfrog over them right now and went right to the citizens with this book and said, you know what? You guys can be the change agents. We need enough people with this information so that our revolution can be successful. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to ruffle the feathers or create a tidal wave of new, empowered, respectfully assertive citizens.
I love that concept of allowing a patient, a person with a life-changing illness, to come out on the other side with their identity intact.
Yes.
When what we know about illness is that their identity is peeled away a piece at a time. You lose capacity for different tasks and roles, and these things change. You can't manage your own bill paying. You can't manage your own personal care. Your identity changes quite a bit just from what the disease takes. But I think that the healthcare system in both our countries actually changed the identities of our patients and their caregivers as well. We disempower them. We disempower them a lot of times by withholding full information, by not providing information with compassion or providing it timely. So what a fantastic tool to set in front of people. And a life-changing diagnosis, what would you consider a life-changing diagnosis?
Well, I mean, my patient population, which is people with progressive life-limiting illnesses, I try to tell people a chronic illness is something that you might have forever, like psoriasis, but it's not necessarily going to be progressive or life-limiting. But there's a whole host of progressive life-limiting illnesses. So here's a trigger warning. I'm going to name some of them, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because sometimes people don't realize that they may have one of them. So, I mean, we can start with dementia is a progressive and life-limiting illness. Parkinson's, ALS, some forms of MS, multisystem atrophy, supranuclear palsy. We can talk about many types of stage 4 advanced cancers. There's variability within some of these illnesses. We can talk about people with advancing heart failure, COPD, interstitial lung disease, cirrhosis of the liver, chronic kidney disease. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Many of these people think that they're chronic illnesses, one that they're going to have, but they're going to be able to, that the horizon's going to stay the same. But it's not fair, because each of these illnesses has a beginning, a middle, an advanced, and a terminal stage. And a patient has the right to know that, because it's their life, it's their illness. But we didn't want to make it only about progressive life-limiting illnesses, because we realized that patients who get any kind of serious illness struggle. So you might have a serious illness like lupus or depression, or there's so many other serious illnesses where you become a patient, and it is a foreign label for most people. And you probably have a caregiver, and that's a foreign thing too. So it really became less about people with progressive life-limiting illnesses and more about a book for any patient and any caregiver. So it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger for us. And we just realized that there's nothing out there for patients and families to help navigate. And this is not about the Canadian system. It's not about the American system. It's literally about being a patient or caregiver.
So if you think about it, isn't almost every diagnosis life-changing in one way or another?
Yeah, really, when you think about it.
Yeah. Diabetes.
Diabetes, yeah.
It's life-changing.
That's right. And if diabetes ends up in end organ damage, it can be a progressive life-limiting illness indirectly.
Yeah.
So, again, it fundamentally goes back to the chasm between patients and families and healthcare providers is so huge. The power differential is so massive that we have silenced patients and families. And that's just simply not fair.
Yeah, I agree. So can we get a little bit personal, Dr. Sammy?
Yes.
So let's talk about advanced care planning.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you outright, and I will share my story as well. You can ask me the same questions. Have you done your own advanced care plan?
Okay. So in Canada, where I live as a citizen, we do not have something called a written advanced care plan that you have to have. We talk about advanced care planning as a discussion that happens over a lifetime and is revisited about your values and what's important to you, and that you share that information with the person in your life who is going to end up being your substitute decision maker if you lose your capacity to make your own healthcare decisions. That person might be your power of attorney for personal care. So the terms are different here, but it's basically knowing yourself well enough, knowing what's important to you, so that in the future, when you're in a situation where you have to make a decision for yourself, or someone else needs to step in and make a decision for you, that they use these conversations that they've had with you and the knowledge of you to make a decision that you would have wanted for yourself and not for them. And it has to be contextualized at the time. So, for example, if my lawyer said to me once, okay, can you tell me, do you want a feeding tube? Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want this? Do you want that? Like a checklist. And my husband smiled because he knew it was going to be complicated. I said to the lawyer, well, my answer to all of those is it depends.
Right.
How could you really expect me to make those decisions right now while I'm well, when those might be important things that I get? Maybe I'm in a car accident and for some reason they expect me to live. And so they need me to have, a feeding tube. Well, I don't want to say I don't want a feeding tube now when it needs to be contextualized. It's more important that my husband, who is going to have to make decisions for me, knows what I value, like being able to communicate, being able to be home, being able to be around my family, being able to have independence, and to be able to take care of myself physically. So if I'm in that car accident, he's going to be able to make a decision, whatever the doctors ask him, based on what he knows is most important to me. So if he knows from the doctors I'm not going to come through with the ability to be home, to have some independence, and to be in control of my situation, then my husband will say no to these things. So so to answer your question, I have had those conversations with my husband. I've had those conversations with my daughters. I have those conversations all the time because of the work that I do. So I come home and I say, wow, I've had a situation, if I was ever in that situation, this is really the kind of thing I would want for myself. So I have no doubt that if my family needed to make a decision for me, they know these things are not, this is a normal everyday conversation for us. I'm in really good hands here. So is it all written down somewhere? No, we don't need to do that in Canada. What we need to do in Canada is know who our substitute decision maker is, or healthcare proxy is. And we need to assign someone in that role. It's a little more complicated than that, but that needs to be done. But we don't have to have a document that has written in it and has been notarized or done with a lawyer that says we want X, Y, and Z, and we don't want X, Y, and Z. So it's a little bit different here. Does that make sense?
It does. Sometimes I think we focus a little too much on having the documents, but not having the discussions, because the documents can't possibly predict every scenario. Like you're saying, you have to put it in a contextual consideration first. So here's a little funny story about my advanced care planning. I remember telling my husband several years ago that I wanted to be an organ donor. I was probably renewing my driver's license. And here in the States, we have that designation put on our driver's license. So if you're ever in an accident, that part of your identification is there. And I told him, I said, I would want to be an organ donor. And he thought about it for a while. And he said, do they pay you for that? Like if I donated your kidneys for you, would they pay me for that? And I said, you know what? You can't donate them while I'm still using them. I didn't get a good feel for what he was going for at that point. And I'm like, you know what? Never mind. I said, I didn't say anything.
That's so funny because when I teach about advanced care planning and goals of care discussions and treatment decisions, I often say that, and I'm just joking, but I say, we have something called the hierarchy of substitute decision makers here. So if something happened to me, we have a natural list of people that the healthcare system would go to if I haven't assigned someone. Mm-hmm. So if it goes to my husband first, I always tell people he would pull the plug if I just fell asleep. So he isn't my person. And then I know on the other end, my mother would keep me alive forever. She would have me on every machine. She would brush my hair every day. She would cream my body, even though I wouldn't want to be alive in that circumstance. So I had to pick someone else who I knew was going to truly be able to make decisions that represented me, not pull the plug too early or keep me alive forever. But anyway, truth is my husband knows exactly what I would want. But
yeah, well, I guess my family's not big on talking about it. I have 2 daughters, and I have one that would keep me alive at all costs. She would have me on a ventilator propped up on the couch somewhere. Years from now, I'd be 111. And then I have another daughter that says, I'm not talking about this with you. You're going to live forever. She just doesn't want to talk about it at all. Yeah. And so I still look at my husband and, think I am surrounded by all these jokers. I have no idea what to do as far as a decision maker goes. So we've had Nathan Kottkamp, and one of the things he says is if you have the right person, they'll make the right decisions. Yeah. So if you have chosen a healthcare proxy that's appropriate for you and you've had those conversations, if you don't have the other documents, it won't matter. That person knows you and your values and what you consider quality of life. They'll make the decisions that are appropriate for you.
It's so true. And, and we do those people a disservice if we've left those discussions to a crisis situation, because they're more likely going to get caught off guard and make a quick decision. And most people say, I would have made a different decision in the crisis. So it's really important while things are not boiling over to have these discussions, because we want people to operate through the lens of what we would want for ourselves, not what they would want for us, right?
Absolutely. So, Sammy, what's one thing we haven't talked about that you would like my listeners to know?
I think I would like the listeners to I'll just reiterate that they have a right to a whole lot more information than they realize when they're going through a healthcare journey. That even though it is the first time for them, billions of people have walked their journey before. And as a physician, I can tell you that we have the roadmap for almost every illness, and you deserve to have that roadmap, the roadmap of Parkinson's or ALS or MS or, cirrhosis. These illnesses are well mapped out. Their chapters, their bus stops, their milestones, decision points, how you're fading from one chapter or stage to the next, what the end is going to look like for all of these illnesses. It is available to you, but it won't be offered to you unless you find your voice. And information and knowledge is power. Even if you think it's going to be something that you don't want to hear, we know that people do better when they have information for better or worse. There is nothing worse than being in the twilight zone, just bobbing around without an anchor. So just know you have a right to seek information, and don't take no for an answer. And you will be better off the more information you have. Information is your currency when you have an illness.
Yeah, that's great advice. Sammy, tell my listeners how they can connect with you, pre-order the book or buy the book, depending on when they're listening, and how they can listen to your podcast too.
Yeah, so you can listen to our podcast. Thank you. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, or you can check out our website at thewaitingroomrevolution.com. You can buy our book. You can pre-order before September the 19th. And come September the 19th, you can pre-order it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Indigo Chapters, any small bookstore. You can follow us on social media. I'd love you to join my Instagram at sammy.winemaker, or you can laugh at my ridiculously boring TikTok videos. My TikTok is dr.sammywinemaker, or Twitter at Sammy Winemaker. Any of those. We'd be happy to hear from people, would love to hear feedback, want to hear your thoughts about this episode, and connect with us, because we need a revolution.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with me, Sammy. Conversation is fantastic. We'll have to have you back to have some more discussion, but thank you so much.
Yeah, Helen, thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity and the incredible work that you're doing as well. Thanks.
So now you see why I think Sammy and I were separated at birth. Sister from another mister, is that what they call it? So they're doing some great things. She and her co-host, Dr. Hsien Seow, some awesome stuff. Their podcast came as a result of being tired of hearing people say, nobody told us this. Why didn't anybody tell us this? It was the same impetus that I had for starting the Heart of Hospice podcast. I got tired of hearing people say, I wish we had known about this sooner. I wish we had known we could do this. So their podcast has helped them to create their book. It was easier for them to discuss all of this and record it, and then the book grew organically from that. The book isn't about end of life. It's not about hospice. It's not about death and dying. It's about changing the experience of a life-changing illness and how to improve the final journey. The way she talks about it is it's being able to come out of the individual trees and be able to look from that 10,000-foot view to see the forest, to see where the path is going. So the Waiting Room Revolution podcast was designed to create a social movement. That's what Sammy calls it. And it's to help people understand their journey better, their end-of-life journey. She feels like coming in as a palliative care physician, that a lot of times she's cleaning up the mess that occurs when people are referred to palliative care at a hospice, because along the trajectory, along this continuum of the healthcare system, they haven't been told about the diagnosis. People haven't been open, or if they've been open, they haven't been fully disclosing. Sammy also believes that healthcare professionals are afraid of giving honest, clear information to people because they fear the patient and the family will lose hope. We hear that a lot. We feel like one of the things we're called to do, even hospice people do this as part of documentation, embodying hope. That's in our electronic recording systems sometimes. As an intervention, did we embody hope? We get uncomfortable sharing difficult news with people. I get that. I think that's reasonable, right? Nobody wants to be the one to tell you that something terrible is happening to you. It may be happening slowly, but this life-altering, life-changing, monumental, intense event is coming straight at you. Nobody wants to hear that. Sammy believes that we need to lean in instead of leaning away. That's a thing about leaning away from dying. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. Nobody's managed to lean away enough that they got away from it completely. So if you have to go through it anyway, why not lean in? Do it with grace and fullness and no regrets. No regrets. So that's what their book is filled with, Hope and Truth. It's a book to help citizens be change agents for the healthcare system by empowering them with information so that they take over with control their own healthcare experience. And she discussed the difference between life-changing and a chronic illness, but most people aren't given that information. They don't know the difference. So you're going to want to find her book. You can pre-order it before September 19th, but it will be available for purchase on September 19th as well. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and the smaller booksellers as well. And you can go to their website, which is waitingroomrevolution.com, to connect with Sammy and with Hsien and check out the work that they're doing, read their blogs, and connect with her on their social media as well. She's got a great Instagram account. It's funny. It's very meaningful. You can get a lot of nuggets of wisdom from them. So check it on out. Be sure to catch the next episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast. You can find more episodes on theheartofhospice.com. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. You can connect with the Heart of Hospice on Facebook and Instagram and send your questions or comments by email to helen@theheartofhospice.com. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.